Now, work was a very interesting one, and again, you probably won't recall, but it was right to the left of the diagram, and people had there were a lot of different ideas about work. But now, the irony of this situation was that so this guy was a scaffolder, and the people, the tradespeople who used in the study were painters and scaffolders, right? It was a scaffolder, not this guy, another guy, scaffolders, and there was a chainsaw guy he used, and the people who didn't were carpenters, because they had to remember all these things and they had all these power tools around. And so they said that they wouldn't use, there were a couple of carpenters and there was a couple of painters. And so it was quite interesting. And all the tradespeople said, oh, the painters, oh, those bloody painters, because of course they got all the fumes around them anyway. Yeah. But, so this was a teacher, obviously, and the teachers, neither would the teachers use. They wouldn't use when they were teaching. They all had exactly the same opinion about that.
You're not sharp enough. That's the problem.
Well, they just had these quite strong sort of moral ideas about the fact that it was inappropriate. Although this guy here, so he's a scaffolder, he said this is a scaffolder, and he was at a child care centre. He was actually one of the few people that I had genuine concerns about. And I did make a point of making available to people in the study if it seemed appropriate information about CADs and so on, and saying, well, you know, you might want to, if you feel you want to do something about this, then perhaps. But he was very definitely a guy who, and you can sort of see that a bit in his narrative here. I wasn't really doing anything else in my life, and he was still in that situation. I was feeling bad that I was stoned, and there's a whole sort of body of theory around this discourse of drug use. But he makes the point that he actually really enjoyed it around the young children because he found he got into doing stuff that he might otherwise not. And as you'll see later on, that was not an atypical response of people around young children. And this is a very challenging discourse because people don't like to think about drug-using parents. Parents on drugs around children. This is a pretty freaky idea. We don't want to think about this. But when you look and listen to some of the conversations, you get a different perspective on it. You get a different take on it. But it's challenging. People don't want to hear it.
It's interesting with the parenting, Geoff, because alcohol is obviously sort of widely acknowledged to be more dangerous in the context of, are you a competent parent? But it's pretty widely accepted that for alcohol use around children, you don't hide it away from them for their entire lives, and normative use is the sort of convention.
My kids
best
are currently playing. One of them's currently playing cricket, and it's on a Friday night, and there's the group of parents who are involved in the cricket. There's all this beer drinking is suddenly happening, and I quite like drinking beer myself. I make my own beer, but I'm kind of feeling a little bit sort of nervous about it because it's these are young kids. They're like 9 years old and younger, and there's all these guys sitting around drinking beer and carrying on, and I'm sort of thinking, well, I've probably already got that, already sort of giving me a bit of skins anyway, but I'm not totally comfortable with the idea, and it's not, I'll have a beer at home, if the kids are around or something like that, but it's, I hear exactly what you're saying.
Well, that's the idea. You wouldn't want to display use to your children that would be, negative use, but you do want to display examples of positive, responsible use. And if you display nothing, and then they find it out for themselves, and it would seem to me that the same logic would apply to cannabis, but it's a very controversial idea.
Well, it is a very controversial idea, not the least because, of course, you're getting the mixed messages of, well, that's what Dad does at home. But then, of course, you go to school and then the deer people turn up with their dogs and stuff like that. Has anybody seen this plant? Well, actually, Dad's got a whole room there. so, you've got that kind of situation.
And kids often know anyhow that something happens out when Dad disappears out the front and he's they know it. They think they don't smoke. They may not be smoking.
Out the back, Lorraine. You're going back to space, you see, mediating spaces.
So I have to say, though, my parents hid it from me when I was growing up. And I had plenty of opportunities to make the connections, and it just never happened. just seemed like the last thing that would ever happen. Know whose parents were cannabis users and hid it from their children, only for them to find out when they were, like 18 or something, are pretty into it, heavy users. That's my situation. Most of the people I know whose parents were sort of really, far out hippies and just did it in front of them are sort of ambivalent about it. Like they're not anti it, but they're not really into it, which is really weird to me because that would seem to say that you should smoke it in front of your kids, but I'm just not quite comfortable with that.
This is an interesting narrative here. Very much incorporated into the work of this guy who was a painter. When I say a painter, I'm not talking about the type of painting that Rodney does. I'm talking about houses and stuff like that. I don't know whether you paint houses, or even if you do, they're probably different. But yeah, but so the funny thing here is, of course, that not only were these guys using, and the cannabis was supplied by their boss, but when they were working for people, the millionaires that they were working for enjoyed the experience themselves and would turn up just to sort of get stoned and de-stressed from their sort of millionaire lifestyle. And I found that sort of quite intriguing. Because I do say to the guy, well, what sort of job did you do if you were stoned on the job? And he's like, oh no, we really zeroed in on it and really focused. And the guys we were working for really liked it, and liked our work. And so it's and that was not. I can see that look of disbelief on your face. It was not the only one by any means in terms of the sample of people who were in that situation. And I was quite surprised. The chainsaw guy amazed me. I was hitchhiking home one day, and I'd occasionally people would say, "What do you do with yourself?" And I'd say, "Oh, I do this, and this is what I'm doing at the moment." And I got in the car with this guy with a truckload of chainsaws in the back. And what are you doing? Oh, this is what I'm doing. Cannabis, he said. I smoke it every day. And I said, oh. Looking over my shoulder at this large collection of chainsaws, I'm thinking, you still got both your legs there, mate. And he was fascinating. So he ended up being a participant in the study. And he was actually a contractor and employed 9 other people, 8 of whom used cannabis on the job. And he said, look, it's a really boring job. He was a contract tree pruner. He said, it's a really boring job. And he said, you just get in the zone, He said, I've pruned 475 trees in a day,
I wonder if it helps if you do the same thing every day.
This is
if you get struck with, if you're stoned, then you get asked to do something different.
Yeah. Well, he was working for himself, and it was the same thing every day. Pine tree, pine tree, pine tree.
And if you basically can't do pine trees, you have to do something else.
Yeah, you got to do this first. No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There goes the finger.
So here's this idea of smoking in front of your children or not. And how space is mediated by use. So that kind of sort of almost validates what you had said previously there, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm still.
It's congruent with it anyway.
Yeah. It's just going to have to happen how it happens for me. Cause, it's hard to decide.
Sometimes, because I know of situations where the knives are on 24/7.
Yeah.
So I've sort of argued health and safety, that the kids now are told to get out of the kitchen. But the kids go back in the kitchen, of course. So, so for those, it's interesting at what age, is it 6, 7? That they become aware of this, whatever. So that's where that dare propaganda scared me when I first seen it,
This piece here is just about this notion of moderation, which was, it wasn't a massive theme in the analysis, but it was one that was there, and people offered their thoughts on how they would use and when and where and so on. I think one of the interesting things is this top one here, where they're talking about just how much they want, they want to get to a certain effect, and this, of course, is something that people can get a little bit angsty over, is this idea of, why do you drink alcohol? Well, after a hard day mowing the lawn, beer slides down really well and this sort of stuff. Or, alcohol, the wine tastes nice. Why are you using cannabis? Oh, well, because I'd like to get out of it. So the idea of, we're not going to talk about that in the context of drinking, but we can see that that's the only reason that people would use a drug like cannabis.